Yes.
Thank you. I agree with you. But I have a question about your diversion program. I want to know what exactly it is and why that couldn't be carried over, not just for veterans, but for nonviolent felons, for felons who pay their dues. The rate of recidivism is high in the state because there are no programs. So I'm very curious about how that program works.
Right now, there's a bill in the legislature that authorizes a veteran court for all the districts. And for under $1 million, it could fully be staffed and run and saved.
I'm not really talking about veterans.
Oh, no, I know, it's money, so if you
I'm
don't even have that.
talking about the other people
Yes,
who
ma'am, that's right.
aren't veterans.
That's right, it's all money, and it's exactly what is being asked for, and the legislature has not provided so far. But it's only money, it's not because there isn't. I've talked to the chief, I've talked to the, everyone, and they want these programs for everyone, you're right. Why shouldn't everybody have that opportunity to go into diversion instead of incarceration? But if you look at our legislature, we're going towards private prisons because it's a money-making thing, so.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
You said you'd be here in November or December. I understand November. What's in December?
Well, there's speculation that where my opponent is now, and I've spoken to a number of people, if the redistricting is ordered, it may push the elections back, so.
Just the congressional, just to be clear. It would just be the congressional races that would show up on the ballot in December.
Oh, okay, so November then.
Okay.
Yes.
What would you like to accomplish in your first term in the House?
Well, in the first term, there's some easy fixes to make Florida more competitive. Right now, we're one of the only states that when a company wants to move here and buys capital equipment, we allow them to depreciate their capital equipment per IRS rules for 7 years. But all the other states, after 7 years, that equipment for the length of its life is now free and clear. Well, the state of Florida puts another millage tax on top of that at fair market value, so it puts every manufacturer in Florida at a disadvantage. So changing some of the tax law and some of the things the legislature can do to make us more competitive, like all of our produce. We can't be competitive even with Georgia because not only do we have to fall under the FDA rules for GMO labeling, but Florida has their own duplicitous rulings that take more human capital and more money just to put labeling on, so we can't sell squash as cheap as Georgia can, so it makes us not competitive. So really for industry and business, so families can get to work, I want to get Medicaid passed so that the 1.2 million and 40,000 veterans can now have care, and I really want to tackle getting the diversion programs paid for.
Yes.
How do you stand on reversing returning the rights to felons, nonviolent felons who have paid their dues, paid their time, and now are stuck in this in-between thing where they can't vote, they can't get a job in many corporations because their rights are not being restored?
Yes, ma'am. I'm working with Congresswoman Castor. I've sat with Charlie Crist on numerous occasions and spoken to Senator Dieter, and I am all for restoring rights, and I've been assured by many people that there's a big groundswell, so I want to do that as well.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next section that we have is the school board, District 1. We have 5 candidates. I'd like the 5 candidates, if they would, to come up and have a seat at the front table. In the meantime, if there are any elected officials here tonight who are candidates but are not on tonight's program, I would like for them to stand and introduce themselves to the group here. Is there any candidates here? Oh, elected officials or candidates, I'm sorry. Yes. All right. Are there any others? Okay, yes, ma'am.
Did you say elected officials or just candidates?
Both elected officials or candidates.
Elected official, coming to sit with the candidates.
Yes. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Dr. Marguerite Malone, chairman of the hospital board.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll go on to the candidates for the school board for District 1. These will take in alphabetical order. First is Jeffrey Fisher. I guess he's not here. Oh, sorry, okay. And Dalton Hodges? Okay.
Good evening. Apparently, Mr. Fisher fell victim to the elevators in Kathy Dent's office, and if you've been in those elevators, you know why that's a possibility. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm running a one-man campaign. I'm doing it without contributions, so I have to take advantage of every one of these opportunities I can get. So I really appreciate you guys having me here. Before I start, I'd like to do one thing. I've tried to do this everywhere we go. I'd like to thank Dr. Carol Todd. She's the lady that we're running to replace. Dr. Todd spent 16 years on the school board, and she had to resign abruptly, suddenly, because her mother has fallen ill. And I haven't spoken with her since, but I wish her the best, and I just want you to know that you won't find a better lady anywhere, and you won't find a better public school advocate than Carol Todd. So she's given us an opportunity, but again, I hope we can all, whoever prevails in this, is able to carry on kind of in the manner in which she did. My name is Dalton Hodges. I'm a lifelong citizen of Sarasota County. I grew up down the street on 17th Street. I remember when Meadows was not here. This was just the woods. I remember when there was a detention center, juvenile detention center, right down the street. And actually, in my middle school career, I actually taught the only student to ever break out of the place. My career spanned 34 years as a teacher. I actually would divide my career up into three different parts. I began at Brookside Junior High in 1978. I graduated from Sarasota High School in 1971. I went to Manatee Junior College at the time. I was a baseball player. I was fortunate enough to have a couple scholarship offers. That's where I went. From there, I transferred with 5 other players to the University of Georgia, where I stayed. I played baseball at the University of Georgia. I say that, and I usually don't trumpet that because of the connections of Florida and Florida State. But Ken is a graduate, and we have a couple other folks running for this office who was actually a graduate as well. So we have alumni meetings after these kind of get-togethers. But I went from the University of Georgia. I stayed in graduate assistantship, got my master's degree in education. I came back to Sarasota. I went to work for years as Boys Club program director. Then I went to Brookside Junior High School. I spent several years there. I got surplus, which means my position was cut, but my employment was not. I went to Garden Elementary in Venice, spent 5 or 6 years there. I became involved in the union. I'm from a union family. My father was the IBEW president here for years. I was elected president of the Sarasota Classified Teachers Association in 1990. I served until 2002. I resigned and went back to Brookside, which is where I wanted to finish my career. And the last 10 years I spent at Brookside, and I retired in 2012. There are a couple of issues that I have. Oh, first of all, my wife is a cafeteria aide at M.E. Booker until tomorrow. She's actually going to retire tomorrow. And we have 2 daughters, both of whom graduated from Booker High School. Both of them got excellent education from Booker High School. They've gone on to work in their chosen professions. Ashley, our oldest, has a degree in biology from USF. She is an animal trainer at Busch Gardens. Her younger sister, Kaylin, whose birthday is today, incidentally, she is entering her 4th year teaching music. She's a pianist in the Hillsborough County Public Schools. There are 2 issues that I've really tried to talk about, one in particular, and that's the need to return the school resource officers to the elementary schools. The school board, a few years ago, eliminated the school resource officers in the elementary schools. We have them, and always did have them, in every school, but they eliminated them. The rationale was they wanted to use those funds to provide mental health programs. Now that may very well be the answer down the road, but until I can be assured that everyone with the intent to do harm and the means to do so is going to attend their mental health programs, then I want the best possible deterrent we can come up with. And to me, that's a school resource officer, a trained, uniformed, armed officer in our schools, our elementary schools as well, with a patrol car. And that's what I want. The second issue, you probably asked me a question, is Common Core. That's a big issue with everyone. I have said repeatedly, and I'll say it here again, I'm somewhat ambivalent personally toward Common Core because I went through 34 years, I went through countless programs like it. None of them ever lasted. And so we have opponents who are against Common Core, and I've said I'll vote tomorrow to eliminate Common Core, but tell me what we're going to replace it with. Assuming that Common Core is there and it's the standards we're going to work at, then I think as a school board member, my charge is going to be to sit down with critics and supporters alike, and let's have an honest discussion about how we make this work in the best interest of our students. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time. I hope you vote Belton Hodges, August 26th. Thank you.
Thank you. Next candidate is Ken Marsh.
Thank you, Dr. Grubb, and good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many interested potential voters out here on this beautiful evening. My name is Ken Marsh, and I'm also District 1 candidate. My intent this evening is to prove to you why I'm the best qualified candidate for this position and seek your vote on or before August 26th. I'm going to begin by sharing with you 3 events in my life that help explain why it is that I'm running for the school board position. The first occurred shortly after I graduated college, and one of my first jobs was as a house parent at a group home for delinquent boys. My wife and I spent almost 2 years in a home outside Atlanta where we had 16 teenage delinquent boys living with us at a time. And I had had a sheltered life at home up until then, and even though I had had a bachelor's degree in psychology with a minor in social work, I was not prepared for the real world of what it was like to deal with students, with young people in those situations. Almost all from homes of poverty, split homes. The thing they certainly had in common was that they were at least a year or 2 behind in school at the age of 14 to 16, and they were not going to make it. Now, they liked to go to school when they weren't at the group home, but that was for socialization, not necessarily for learning. I learned a lot there, went on to get my master's degree in social work, and moved here to Sarasota County in 1979. And that's where the second event occurred, when I was hired as the first school social worker in Manatee County, with Manatee County Schools, and I'd had that job for 9 years. And I was the link between the school, the teachers, and again, troubled homes. So they weren't living with me this time, but I was visiting their homes on behalf of the school, trying to get those parents involved with their children's education. And the stories I could tell you, the 21-year-old single mom with 6 children, one of whom was in kindergarten, 6 separate births. The first child in Manatee County schools confirmed with HIV, school district not knowing what to do with that particular student. On and on, again, learning about the problems that children have at home that interfere with what ought to be going on at school. But the third event occurred in 1995 when I was fortunate enough to move from the Manatee School Board to the Sarasota School Board. And it was a change in my career because up until then I'd worked almost entirely one-on-one with students and families and with those teachers. And that's very gratifying to do that work when you see that change. But the change in my career at that time was when I left that hands-on work behind and began to work as a supervisor and an administrator at a greater level, trying to impact more people by setting policies, organizing programs, bringing to the school board things that needed to be done on behalf of students. So what did I do in the meantime to help get that part of my social work core? I volunteered, tutored, I was a mentor, worked with schools wherever I could. But that explains why I'm running for the school board, because now I believe I am ready to take all I've learned and apply it district-wide to a school system of 41,000 students and 5,000 employees. A little bit about my qualifications. 35 years in local public education, moved from Manatee to Sarasota schools in 1995, and it was that point that I began to get involved in programs such as school choice, charter schools, student assessment, homeless education, those kinds of things, again, dealing with troubled students and issues that were sensitive to the entire county. And then in 2003, I was fortunate enough to be selected as the first director of long-range planning for the school district, taking that, again, comprehensive, system-wide outlook for the schools, working with local developers to see where residential growth was going to be, working with local communities to determine where schools were going to be, buying the land, and getting that infrastructure going. And those were very gratifying. And during that time, I was very involved with community organizations and developing those relationships that we all know are important at a school board level when system-wide decisions are needing to be made. I want to share with you some of the endorsements I received recently: Sarasota Association of Realtors, the Firemen and Paramedics, the SCTA, so the teacher union, and I would encourage you all to pick up the latest issue of the Observer papers, because the most glowing recommendation for me that I could ever imagine was in the Observer Group papers today. So I seek your support. I believe I'm the most qualified to handle whatever comes before the school district in the next 4 years, including selection of the next superintendent. And I would again appreciate your vote on August 26th. Thank you very much.
The next, I guess that, is Paul Schaefer here?
Yeah.
I guess not. And finally, for this group, we have Bridget Ziegler.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bridget Ziegler. I am currently I'm your school board member for District 1, seeking to continue my seat. I grew up outside of Chicago in a little town called Wheaton, Illinois. My parents relocated here in 2000, and I moved here in 2010. One thing that was really amazing to me about Sarasota is I started to get involved with a lot of the philanthropic groups. And it was profound how involved this community really is. It's amazing. You don't see that everywhere. That resonated with me a lot. I continued to volunteer with Make-A-Wish Foundation and Children's First, along with some other organizations. But then I became a mother, and something in you changes when you become a parent. I think many of you can agree there is an innate fire inside you to make sure that you provide everything to ensure that child's success, and I think that begins with education. So here I am as a school board member, and I think my biggest thing is communication with the community, with the parents, with the teachers, making sure that we understand that we're all in it for the best education of our children. And when you partner together with people and know that you have the same goal, which is a successful education, I think that it's a winning solution. I have been very fortunate to have the endorsements of some wonderful people in our community. One thing that was mentioned earlier was the safety of our schools. Sheriff Tom Knight has endorsed me. He's a friend of mine. He's a wonderful man. He's done wonderful things for this community, and we've discussed how we can make sure that Sarasota County schools are as safe as possible. That's a great example of working with the members of our community and the leaders of our community to make sure that we have a conversation, use the resources that are out there, and again, ensure that we have the best education. What I'd like to see is, there is a lot of talk about Common Core. I am an advocate for local control. I think that the way you do that is having engaged families and parents. I believe education begins at home. I believe that families that support education and promote the importance of it is a foundation that will go a long way with that child. And with that said, I think that if a parent and a teacher work together, I think that there's an ability to, like I said, work for that same common goal. I think that customization for a curriculum is the right way to go. I think that every child learns differently, and we need to see that in the classroom. Engaged students is so important. And when you start to keep it very general, I think you lose their attention, and that's when we start seeing things slip. And I absolutely think that's an achievable goal. I think that we're overcomplicating things. You need to just focus on parents, teachers, and students, and listen and communicate and hear what they're saying. And I truly believe it's a lot more simple than we're making it. So again, I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to speak with the community. That's my goal, to make sure that we're constantly talking. There's a lot of talk about, for example, I say I want parents to be involved, and then someone says, well, but they're never here showing up. So, okay, and I'm seeing that. But then we need to go back to the drawing board and figure out a way to engage them. And I'm all ears. So, and I think that I'm always interested to hear what people have to say, because I think there's a reason that people aren't stepping up or talking, or they're talking and we're not hearing them. So we just need to figure out what that is. I would appreciate your vote on August 26th. I am, again, very passionate, very excited about this opportunity. And again, I always welcome any questions or some feedback that you have, because it is all about the community. So again, thank you for your time.
you very much. Now we'll open the session up to questions for the school board members. Yes.
First of all, I want to say that I wish all three of you could be elected. I really seriously mean that, because I love what each one of you said, and you represent different viewpoints, and I wish we had some of that within our community. But I have a very simple question, and I would like each one of you to respond thoughtfully to it, please. How do you feel about cell phones in the classrooms? And I mean, I work in a school, so this is a loaded question, I agree. But I really need to know how people feel.
Let's start at
It is a huge distraction. Not only is it a huge distraction, it is a detriment to the instructional environment. I've had kids sitting with their jackets over their hands, and you know good and well they're texting, you know, and how they can do that without looking at it, I have no idea. The problem that you get into, though, is an enforcement problem. I'd be happy to get rid of them in the classroom. The problem, we've tried before, the problem is, how do you supervise, or how do you watch those ones? Like, you collect them at the beginning of the class period, then what happens to them? Then you get it. I mean, we've had people, administrators don't even want to touch them. They don't want anything to do with it, because if one gets lost and the parents all over you. But if I had my druthers, if I was king for a day, I'd say, no, you don't bring a cell phone in here. Even the first 2 weeks of school, I'd shut down the email system. I'd make you get up and go talk to somebody. That's what I'd do.
Thank you.
Mr. Marsh.
Yeah, I think Belton raised some good points, both on the need to control them, and then in reality, the difficulty that's inherent in that. Cell phones for all of us in the past 10 years have really changed. I remember, of course, we didn't have them, and students weren't bringing them, and now they're allowed to be out there. I understand the distraction issue, but if there were a crisis, that's another. Cell phones are additional vectors for getting some help. How to control them, though, I don't understand, because we're not king for a day. We can't just go like that. They're here. I'd like to listen to some teachers and hear, and the principals as well, and see what kind of solutions there might be.
Mrs. Ziegler.
I personally agree that they should not be allowed in schools. I think it's a distraction. I know it's no matter who's talking in front of me, if my cell phone buzzes from an email or what have you, my attention immediately is diverted. The students are there to learn, and I understand that there are critics saying that we can utilize the devices for learning purposes, and I agree with that, but I think, again, trying to simplify things. I was part of Leadership Sarasota, and if anyone isn't aware or isn't familiar with it, I am a huge advocate of it for the chamber. But what they did is it made